This episode offers psychosocial education designed to inspire and motivate our listeners. The information provided does not constitute a therapeutic relationship nor a substitute for professional mental health care. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911, go to your nearest emergency room, or for listeners in the United States, text 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Thanks for tuning in to Harvesting Happiness today for a healthy serving of consciously prepared brain food. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen, your host. Since 2010, we've been broadcasting sound ideas for better well-being. Each week, we spotlight diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents, devoting their lives to creating a better world. I invite you to listen and change how you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. This episode explores human sexuality and is intended for mature audiences. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where we are talking about self-confident modern love. That's right, romance, connection, and well-being. My guest today is Dr. Amanda Gesselman. Dr. Gesselman is a social developmental psychologist specializing in advanced research methods and statistics at the Kinsey Institute, where she is the head of the Research, Analytics, and Methodology Core and is the inaugural Anita Aldrich Endowed Research Scientist at Indiana University. Her research explores modern trends in romantic and sexual relationships, the impact of close relationships on health and well-being, and the role of technology in fostering meaningful connections. Dr. Gesselman's work is widely published in peer-reviewed journals and has gained international attention from major media outlets like Time, Vice, and Netflix's Explained. Welcome, Amanda. Before we get started, I want to pay tribute to somebody who really has made a difference in so many lives and I know is very close to you, and that is Dr. Helen Fisher and her recent passing. And she was a vital person at the Kinsey Institute and was the head scientist at Match.com. And really, let's talk a little bit about Helen, because she's been on the show a couple of times and I so enjoyed and valued her work.
Yeah, Helen Fisher was an absolute legend, I think, in our field. She was the first person to put people into an fMRI machine and look at their brain on love, quote unquote, as they were falling in love or as they were going through a breakup. Yes. And through her, we learned so much more about this phenomenon that most people seek out and cherish. I think she was one of the top voices in our field. She was a mentor to me. She was just a huge personality, a huge inspiration for a lot of people, including myself for sure.
Yeah.
So her passing was, quite a loss for many of us. I felt that pretty deeply, and she's certainly missed here every day. So love to pay tribute to her in any way we can. I think she was just a huge inspiration, just a hugely important person, such a big personality, had so many beautiful, hilarious stories to share with people, to bring you into her world and bring you on her journey with her.
Funny.
Yeah, so funny.
Yeah. And as I remember, wait, hang on one second, Amanda, going back to the fMRI and our brains on love, wasn't it like being on cocaine?
Yeah, she found that when she put people into those brain scanners, what she found was that the same area of the brain lit up when people were in love or, in those early stages of love where you feel kind of obsessed and you can't stop thinking about anything else but that person. She found that lit up the same area of the brain as drug addiction, cocaine addiction, whatever drug you fancy, that same brain area was lighting up. So that means that it felt very similar to those experiences that people might have on drugs. And on the flip side, when people were going through breakups or sort of unrequited love, she found that was very similar in the brain to drug withdrawal.
Oof.
And so, it really showed us the huge significance of love, I think, in our lives and how deeply that can impact people and how strongly someone can feel about another person.
Let's take Helen's work for a second and weave it into your research that you are doing on pursuing sexuality online, modern romance, because it's the same theme, but at kind of a different level. And I'd love for you to share with our listeners the juicy deets of what you've discovered.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been studying how technology intersects with our romantic and sexual lives for about 10 years now in all kinds of directions for technology. So, of course, online dating, which is now the number one place that people meet their partners. We actually just finished a study where we pulled 10 years of data from 2012 to 2023, where we were asking actively dating singles where they met their most recent first date. And what we found was that since 2012, online dating apps have been the source for finding someone's partner. And that doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what race or ethnicity you are, what gender, what sexual orientation. It's the way. It's the way for, an 18-year-old. It's the way for an 80-year-old. It's sort of here to stay. I know lots of people have, frustrations about online dating. They've experienced bad outcomes or bad dates and haven't quite been able to find a good connection through there. But even with that said, it does seem to be the predominant avenue that people are finding love these days. And that is especially true for people in the LGBTQ community. They're using online dating at a more rapid or amplified rate than heterosexual people, but still across all groups. Yeah, it's been very consistent since 2012. There's sort of no stopping it at this point. So it's here to stay. And I think that's really interesting personally to insert a sort of middleman into something that we've strived for millennia at this point. It's sort of in our evolutionary evolved behavior or in our DNA to strive for love, to find a connection. So I think that it's quite interesting that something has risen over the past couple of decades and really taken that spot for us. Whereas, previous generations would have met through friends or through family, through church, through work, etc. Yeah, online dating is here. And a lot of my research looks at how that technological component, helps facilitate or hinders and how people might be using it in ways that we might not expect.
That's really interesting because I see how it gives us some sovereignty, right? Like we're in charge of this search, which is great, right? Like it goes to that, or the CEO of our own lives thing, which I think is wonderful. And then really the rest is in the storytelling, right? How do we package and market ourselves to be successful, which is like a whole other conversation, right? Like that's not what your research is, but I think that would be interesting to understand. Like, what are the successful tools that we need to have in crafting the narrative about ourselves that gets us connected?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that we found in a lot of our surveys when we were looking at people who are using online dating apps or sites or trying to find a partner in that way is that they struggle with how to represent themselves in a really meaningful way, how to bring across their personality and say what they're looking for in a way that doesn't potentially scare off potential partners or, make it seem like I'm looking for a wedding on the first date or something. But also on the flip side, people report that they really struggle with the way other people convey themselves too. So it's really difficult to, have just a small text box to describe yourself, a limited number of characters that you can use. It's really hard to figure out how you want to describe yourself and then to be able to do it in such a very small, limited way that might convey the authentic version of yourself without having to sacrifice a lot of it for character count or, make it more appealing to a broader audience. I think people really struggle with that. And what we found is that people are really searching for that authenticity. They really want to see things on people's profiles that really tell them who that person is so that they can get a good idea of whether or not they will be compatible and whether or not this is a person they want to pursue. But everyone struggles with that, with how to do that. And so it becomes this sort of, frustrating loop where people don't know how to do it for themselves and they're frustrated with how everyone else is sort of lacking that information as well. But by and large, what we find is that people are really just searching for that marker of authenticity there. So I think that's an area that technology is still sort of lacking for a lot of people. Yes, online dating is the number one way to find partners, but we still haven't quite mastered how to make it the best for us. That's sort of to be expected. We've been pursuing and falling in love forever, but
It's the beginning of
technology has,
time.
yeah, technology has only really arisen as part of the formula for us in the last couple of decades. So I think that we just haven't quite figured out how to adapt it perfectly yet. But I, optimistically hope that we're on the right track with that at this point.
It's like elevator pitching, right? You have to
Yeah.
capture your essence in not even that 30-second ride or a minute ride, right? It's literally probably 5 or 10 seconds that somebody will look at someone else's profile and swipe in one direction or the other.
Yeah, exactly. And some research done on OkCupid from the book Dataclysm, if anyone's interested, from the book Dataclysm, they show that people are more likely to respond to messages from other people if they're shorter. So if you write a much longer message, you're less likely to get a response. People feel like that's a bit overwhelming. They don't want to spend the time reading it. And so you really have this, 1 to 2 sentence chance to make your impression. And I think that that's so difficult. And it's not something that we've necessarily had to think about until recently. How can we make that first impression and how can we do it in one sentence that really draws someone in and conveys our personality and shows what we're looking for and, shows compatibility. So I think that we've gotten into this really unique situation that no one's quite had to encounter before the last few years.
Let's tap into another part of your research about sexuality online and
Sure.
campsite users, because this
Mhm.
may be an ear opener for some of our listeners. Talk a little bit about that, explaining what this is and its impact on modern romance today.
Sure. So I have a little research team here. There are 5 of us, and we've been studying how people use campsites since around 2019. So campsites are kind of like porn sites, like if you think of Pornhub or whatever porn site you prefer, in that they offer sexual entertainment, right? They offer access to people who are performing sexual acts. But the difference between porn sites and campsites is that when you log onto a campsite, the people are there in real time. So you can watch someone perform a solo show or maybe a partnered show, and you can pay for a private one on one session with them. And so that looks like maybe like using Zoom or Skype, where they're on video chat with you, and you can turn on your video too if you like. And the two of you, or, if there's a couple, the three of you, can have this private session where you talk, where you behave sexually if you want to. There may or may not be nudity, there may or may not be sexual acts, but they are a website where you can log on and interact with someone in real time. Generally, they're in their bedroom or in a place that looks like their own bedroom, so it feels very personal and private. And this is actually a pretty common method for quote unquote sexual entertainment. So we did a study a few years ago looking at the prevalence of people who use campsites in the US, and we found that 18% of American adults are using them.
That's a lot.
And yeah, it is
That
a
is
lot.
really a
So,
lot of people.
right. And that was before we did that right before the pandemic. And once the pandemic started, lots of campsites reported an uptick in the amount of visitors they had as people felt lonelier and couldn't go out in person and socialize. So my guess is that numbers only increased since we did that study back in 2019 or early 2020. So yeah, there are a lot of people, especially in the US, who are using campsites, and we've been studying them at least on a yearly basis. And what we found is that yes, they are a source of sexual entertainment and sexual connection, but for between a quarter and a third of users, they're also a source of emotional intimacy. So in the US and honestly globally, we're in what the CDC calls a loneliness epidemic. People are feeling lonelier than ever. They're feeling more disconnected. They're feeling like their emotional needs are not met. And what we found on campsites is that a good percentage of people are finding that connection and that kind of treatment, I guess, for lack of a better word, the sort of soothing of that feeling on campsites by interacting with these performers. And so for these people, between 25 and 33% of them, they log on and they have these private one-on-one interactions that aren't necessarily sexual. So
Yeah.
they don't even have to get, they don't have to take off their clothes. They don't have to show nudity. They don't have to perform sexually. They just want these connections. They want these conversations with the performers. And so oftentimes they form these really deep relationships where they come back and visit the same person over and over and over again. And they really get to know each other. They share really deep personal details with one another. And it can become a years-long relationship that they form. And recently we did a survey of users, of people who log on and pay for these services. And about 1 in 4 of them felt like these connections that they were having provided the same benefits that they would get from going to traditional therapy. So it really is providing some mental relief for them and definitely providing some deep emotional connections that we wouldn't have otherwise expected. I don't think anyone, sees a campsite and thinks, oh, this is a place where I can form deep relationships and tell someone, all about my life and my secrets and get some mental relief. But it's what we've been finding over and over and over again for the past 5 or so years now. So
it makes sense, because when we talk about the profound feelings that we have when we feel deeply heard, right? That this space, it's a one-on-one environment. Oftentimes, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the person who's operating the site, it's their business.
Yes. So the campsite that we use is called livejasmine.com, and they advertise our surveys for us. And so that business is owned by, an organization or a corporation, but the performers get to decide when they want to show up on the website, when they want to broadcast. So it's very, performer driven in that kind of way. The performers themselves don't own the site, but there are some websites that performers do personally, individually own, and they perform only on that site.
But it speaks to, I think, the desire for human connection, right? And if you don't have
absolutely
accessibility, whether it's a physical accessibility or even emotional accessibility, somebody can want these things, but not actually be able, for whatever reason, to actually engage in the relationship in real life together. They have this outlet, which seems perfectly fine. I mean, I get it. Like, when you talk about it that way, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do find in some of our surveys, we've had some of these, customers tell us that the reason they go to the website is because they are in a relationship and their partner, for one reason or another, doesn't want to have sex or can't have sex. So maybe they have a disease or a disability that prevents them from doing so. Maybe they just don't want it. Maybe they're asexual or they have a low libido. And they have agreed that this is a fine outlet for, the partner who wants sex to pursue that. And so this is a kind of surrogate sexual partner for them in that kind of way. And they're both okay with it. I think that's so interesting. And, and from their standpoint, a perfectly acceptable way for them to pursue their needs and fulfill them.
I get it. I agree with you. I mean, it really requires some thinking about it. It's like, as you talk about this, I'm like, this makes perfect sense. And when we talk about subjective well-being and how we want to live our lives, I get it. No judgment. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we will continue the conversation with my guest today, Dr. Amanda Gesselman. To learn more, please go to the Kinsey Institute on X, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also find Amanda Gesselman on LinkedIn, and the KinseyInstitute.org is the website. We'll be right back. Harvesting Happiness is rooted in science. Our work facilitates applied positive psychology practices through media and consulting. We're committed to sound ideas for better well-being, leading to increased life satisfaction and a better world for everyone. We're not into pseudoscience or quick fixes. We're focused on common sense backed by rigorous research. Healthy critical thinking is the foundation for our discussions. We encourage you to challenge preconceptions and explore ideas with a curiously discerning mind. Collaboration with our guests is united by an inclusive vision to boost resilience, critical thinking, communication, and problem solving through civilized discourse and pleasurable relational engagement for everyone. Each day, we have the intellectual freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable, regardless of external circumstances. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please seek support because good psychological health is vital to the achievement of a healthy and satisfying life. Visit harvestinghappiness.com for psychosocial and educational services that boost emotional and social intelligence. This episode explores human sexuality and is intended for mature audiences. And we are back. We're talking about self-confident modern love. That means romance, connection, and well-being. Let's get back to the conversation with my guest today, Dr. Amanda Gesselman. Amanda, let's just recap what we covered in the last segment because it's kind of mind-boggling. The state of affairs in terms of online dating, these apps being the go-to, the golden standard now to find love no matter where in the world you are, at whatever age you are. That's a good bet. And then also about how campsites and other online platforms can be a space not just for sexual outlet, but really about learning to create intimacy and love language skill building.
Absolutely. In a recent survey, we found that people who had higher levels of anxiety or higher levels of depression were more likely to turn to these outlets, to campsites and other types of technology mediated sexual spaces. And what we find is that it's really providing them with A, emotional connection, but also B, a way to practice skills that they might need to create more social connection in their day-to-day lives. So both the performers and the customers have told us in our surveys that it's really providing an outlet for these paying customers to practice their skills, to gain more social and communication skills, and to learn how to have relationships with other people in ways that they hadn't known before and that could really benefit them going forward. So I think it's inadvertently a very important and really kind of special space that these people have found. And of course, we're still doing research with both performers and customers throughout the year, but it's been really eye-opening for me and really fascinating and interesting to be able to watch this unfold and watch the kinds of relationships that they form on these sites and the ways that they get to practice these skills and how they might take them forward. So people actually think that they're going to be better relationship partners moving forward, that they're going to be better able to listen to their partner's needs and wants going forward, and that they might be able to, make friends more easily than they could have before, which I think is just certainly an unexpected benefit, but I think so important for so many people.
What about skill building, like learning different techniques and skill building for greater sexual expression and pleasure?
Yeah, we asked them in the last year or so, we asked them about things that they had learned that they might be able to apply to their life outside of the camming environment. And what we found was that around one-third of them, one-third of the customers, I should say, felt like they've learned how to be a better partner specifically to women. So for heterosexual men, they've learned how to be a better partner to women going forward, both relationally in terms of listening and being able to be more openly communicative, but also sexually. So they've learned about women's bodies and they've learned about what women may or may not like and how most women are unique in what they like and how you have to, have conversations around their dislikes, their likes, their preferences, their desires. They've learned how to generally be a more open-minded partner, how to talk about things without ruining the moment. Many of them have learned how to navigate sexual consent, which I think is hugely important. And they've learned how to have that explicit conversation both before the sexual bit and also during in a way that keeps the flame going without being too awkward or, making it a big deal. But they've learned lots of things about how to be, good, informed, educated sexual partners moving forward.
So there is no downside, really, is what I'm hearing. I mean, not that everybody should run out and join a campsite.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm suggesting. But for those that participate, the upside is it's more than just a monetary exchange, not just a fee for service. They're getting more out of it.
Right. Many of them are getting much more out of it.
Yeah.
Certainly, some people do go to the campsite just for the sexual outlet, the sexual entertainment, the sexual release. But the people who come back over and over again are getting more than just that, and they're pursuing more than just that. So we found that the reason that they want to revisit or they want to come back to the website tends to be more than just the sexual aspect of it. I actually think only 12% of our users say that the sexual aspect is their main reason for coming to the site. They're
Fascinating.
repeat users.
It's a new
Yeah.
world. And as
Yeah.
it should be, it's like we should be using technology more than technology uses us, right? In terms of
Exactly.
storing data, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we should be using it as a tool
Yes,
to help
definitely.
us.
Let's talk about relationships in general
Okay.
and statistics about the impact of romantic relationships and sexual satisfaction to human happiness. Because we all know that that's true, but you've got
Yeah.
data, you've got details.
Sure. So there are classic sort of studies in my field and huge meta-analyses. So studies of all the studies in the field that have shown that having a satisfying romantic relationship can be more important to our physical health and the length of our lifespan than things like job satisfaction or how much money we make or what kind of housing we live in. It can be sort of the number one contributor to our well being overall. And so we've done several studies about that over my time here at Kinsey. And first, what we recently found was that over people's lifetimes, they generally tend to fall into passionate love twice. So the average that people have throughout their life is two times of being in love passionately.
So that's cocaine brain love, right? Like where you can't
Yeah, cocaine
you
brain
can't
love,
keep it together.
absolutely. Yeah, and of course there might be a little bit of bias in terms of, looking back, right? So as we age, we tend to look back at our old relationships and think, I'm not really sure I was in love back then. Maybe it was just a really big crush or puppy love or infatuation. It's not necessarily love. So there's a little bit of, recall bias there. But in general, people tend to report that throughout their lifetimes, they've been in passionate, deep, all-consuming love twice. So, although love is a huge topic for us, both research wise and in all of the media that we all consume, it does seem to be kind of a rarity. It's not something that we're constantly experiencing or constantly falling in and out of. But with that said, the experience of being in love and the experience of being in a relationship that feels good and supportive and satisfying and happy can have huge benefits for us. So, other studies have found that having that kind of relationship versus not can heal wounds faster, can help you recover from surgery up to 6 weeks faster, which is huge if you think about,
Wow.
the time lost at work and the sort of unemployment that you might have to go through to recover from something like that. I think that those findings are just mind blowing. And in our particular studies, I've been collaborating with some people in the School of Nursing here, and we've been looking specifically at people with epilepsy and how their relationships impact their self-management of their disease. So people with epilepsy, many, if not most of them, have to take medications on a daily basis to keep their seizures at bay, to keep them seizure free, or at least having very low severity seizures. And what we found in our studies is that for people with epilepsy who are in relationships that feel good and feel satisfying to them with low levels of conflict between partners, they're actually better able to manage their condition and they have less severe seizures over time.
Wow.
So something about the stress of being in a poor quality relationship, being in a relationship that has a lot of arguments and conflict, or in a relationship that just doesn't feel satisfying anymore, something about that stress leads to a lower likelihood of just being able to keep up with your medical regimen, to follow doctor's orders, to take your
Interesting.
medications on time. Yeah. And it leads to seizures that feel more severe, which can, of course, be very damaging to one's body, one's brain, and to quality of life over time. So we've been doing a few studies about that over the last few years, specifically with people with epilepsy, looking at how, maybe enhancing their relationships might be helpful. So we've been developing an intervention over the past year to 18 months that is working with people with epilepsy and providing them with these little tasks or assignments that help them better connect with their partner and talk through things that might be bothering them in a way that could be constructive and helpful in an effort to boost the way that they both feel about the relationship. So it's kind of dual purpose. It is aimed at improving the relationship and making both partners feel happier in the relationship, but also providing them with more communication skills to talk about ways they might need help managing their condition with their partner. So telling their partner, sometimes I might need help with this, or here's some things you need to look out for me to, help me stay on track. So that's what we've been developing over the last year. And I hope to have it out and ready to test on a larger level around this time next year.
Oh, that's exciting. As you're speaking, I'm thinking about like psychological safety and how these intimate relationships provide that, which then makes us feel secure. And when we're feeling secure, we're more likely to operate better in the world, albeit medication regimen or anything else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's what we're hoping to reinforce or to build. So we've been recruiting couples who have varying levels of that feeling of safety or that feeling of whether or not their relationship is high quality. And we're trying to see if we can help them build that up and feel more secure and safer and more supported in that relationship. Because when you don't feel those things, when you don't feel that your partner or your relationship is a safe space for you or is a wholly supportive environment, the levels of stress that you carry for that because of that, maybe that's not conscious to most people, but there is this stress that follows you around because you don't have that support and that safe space that you can just, decompress and let loose in, that you can feel like you can be yourself and be, exactly who you are and still have that support. If you don't have that level of stress, even if you might not know that that's what that's coming from, that level of stress can be really detrimental to all of our mental health, to all of our well-being. And it can really cause a lot of problems over time. Like I said, there are studies about wound healing and healing from surgery that show that people in healthier relationships live longer, like up to 8 years longer. So having, incredible. So not having those supportive relationships or being in a relationship that doesn't feel that way, that doesn't provide that support, can actually be pretty hugely detrimental in a very clear, measurable way to us over time.
We need to stop now, but I think we need to continue this conversation. And I would love to invite you back to talk more because there's so many questions that I have and so many other areas of your research expertise that I would love to share with the audience. Dr. Amanda Gesselman, thank you so much for joining me today. And we'll do more, I hope, to learn about Amanda's work. Please go to thekinseyinstitute.org. You can find the Kinsey Institute and Amanda out there in the social media world, but on X at Kinsey Institute, Instagram, Facebook, also at Kinsey Institute, and on LinkedIn. You can find Dr. Gesselman there as well as the Kinsey Institute. Thank you so much. I love every minute and the case that you build for good love and our happiness and well-being.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fantastic, and I look forward to coming back.
Thanks for joining us today on Harvesting Happiness. On behalf of my guest today, Dr. Amanda Gesselman, this is Lisa Cypers Kamen wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day and remember to be kind to one another. Want to explore more sound ideas for better well-being? Check out our new bonus edition content at More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness on Substack and Medium. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Harvesting Happiness and More Mental Fitness are produced by Lisa Cypers Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the excellent team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Guest, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.